Welcome to Changing Suits. We're your hosts, Bal
and Taj, discussing the latest news, views, and general life for us Western Asians.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Hi, welcome to Changing Suits. My name's Bal.
And my name's Taj.
On this week's episode, we wanted to pick up on a topic that is very much a very sensitive topic and a very recent topic. Today we've got Vinay with us, who is the councillor of Priory Vale Ward. And unfortunately, within his ward, he's had a horrific crime happen. And we wanted to talk about not the specifics of the event, however, as a general, about the safety. So Vinay, if you could just introduce yourself and let us know what's happened within your ward.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm Councillor Vinay Manro. I represent the Priory Vale ward in Swindon, and I am a local Conservative councillor. So we've had a tragic incident where a young man was stabbed and has sadly passed away. It's caused a lot of tensions within the community, and it's kind of re-highlighted that it's on the increase, or certainly appears to be on the increase. And there are stats that back it up. But my slant on it prior to these events was really the impact on the BAME community, and how within the BAME community, certainly from the figures that are available, it appears that you're 66% more likely to be convicted of a knife crime compared to a comparable white person. So it's really digging into why that is, and what can we do to help that along the way.
So Vinay, you mentioned the 66%. Why is it that we've got that 66% that are involved in some sort of knife crime or picked up for knife crime?
I think it's twofold. I think there are areas throughout the country where BAME communities come together, and we seem to have this thing where we like to live together, and over the years, areas a bit like Southall, parts of Leicester, parts of Bradford, become Asian areas or black dominated areas, and the world around them is more perhaps like back home, the way they act. And I want to say vigilantism comes into it, but I think that's a harsh way of looking at it. I think the fact is a lot of the BAME community are at the lower end of the earning spectrum, and then more likely to get involved in crime, and that escalates. But what I think we're seeing at the moment is generally youths have got less to do, so they're out on the streets. And don't get me wrong, when I was a youngster, I was out playing football or cricket or anything. But that doesn't seem to be happening now. What we're seeing is just hanging around outside shops, in play parks, and people are being targeted. Youngsters are being targeted by this organised crime, and they're made to, run drugs, run money around, run items around. Starts off as favours, but it soon escalates. You soon become kind of stuck in that environment.
See, now hearing your comment from, say, like a British point of view, or maybe that's not the right thing to say, but I'd say, why are you letting people in that are creating these crimes? Are they people that are British, or are they coming from outside?
I think it can be mixed. I think the BAME community are part of the problem, but I don't think that's exclusive. I think it is that we're allowing youngsters, and particularly vulnerable youngsters, and I think there are subsections of the community that are of BAME origin that are more vulnerable because of the economic status they're in. And that's not necessarily reflected as much in Swindon with what's going on, but certainly in large parts of the country where there are economic disparities, we are seeing this. We're seeing people be groomed into a gang culture.
But just on that point, I mean, looking at the figure, 66% sounds like a very large figure, but let's not forget that knife crime is on the up within all communities.
It is. I think from March 21 to March 22, it's up by about 10% across the country.
So a large part of it, rather than saying it's a cultural issue where we're splitting it between BAME and so on and so forth, perhaps is a financial issue, like you've said, and that's more of the problem. And surely the fact that we've got this cost of living crisis will only make this problem worse from that perspective. Would you?
I think it's definitely increased as part of what we saw in lockdowns. I think that's had a massive impact. People have become more vulnerable because of their mental health. Being locked up indoors is difficult, and there's a bit of a rebellion going on now where people don't want to be at home and they're out and about. And I think that's being seen more and more in certain youngsters, and perhaps where the parents aren't aware of where the youngsters are going, and they're getting embroiled in county lines. The word currently is going country. When people come to Swindon from outside, London in particular at the moment, they're going country. We're classed as country down in Swindon. Um, I'm not sure where that comes from, but there is certainly an increase in county lines. And there's an example, I won't name any names, but I know of a youngster who's currently getting some help. He had his mobile phone stolen in the town centre. Long gone, the guy's gone that's taken it. Someone else comes up to him, plays sympathetic, what happened? I saw what happened. Let me help you. Hold this bag for me. I think I know where that guy will be. I'll go and get your phone back. 10 minutes later, he's back with the phone. He's returned it to him and said, right, I've got you your phone back. Now you owe me.
Oh my God. So it's the setup.
Take this bag, go and stand on that corner. Someone will come and give you another bag. You swap bags. And yes, the answer is the person that took the phone is involved in this scheme. They've set this vulnerable youngster up who at the time was only walking home from school, and he was then embroiled in it. He thought, okay, I'll deliver this bag and I'll be done. I can go home. But no, you come back tomorrow. I'll tell you when we're done.
Hold on. So what's the next step? Why would that youngster then go, okay, for the first time you get it, it's tit for tat, fine. Why would they then come back the next day? What am I missing?
It's fear, isn't it? If you don't come back tomorrow, I've got a knife. I'm going to come after you.
Oh, wow.
I know, I know your route. They've, from what I know of this particular case, that they're watching. They're out there watching. They're looking for the vulnerable ones. They're looking for the ones that are walking home on their own. Why are they walking home on their own? Typically, people are walking in groups. You're walking with friends, so they find these outliers, these vulnerable kids, and they're preying on them. It's tragic.
Is this because obviously these types of schemes and ways of doing this, gang culture has been there for a very, very long time. And there's always new tactics that people play on. Is this a new tactic in that case?
I don't honestly I don't know. This is just what we're seeing more recently, that youngsters are being kind of brought in by these kind of scams. Really, they're drafted in, and it only gets worse. If they don't find a way out early enough, and luckily this particular youngster has, uh, the favors get worse and worse, and soon they're heavily involved.
And how can we, as parents, pick up any, I don't know, differing of behaviour at home? Do you think there are signs that we can look out for?
Yeah, I think there must be. I think one in particular that we're seeing is money. All of a sudden you're buying trainers and you're saying you've saved up pocket money, or, I sold my PlayStation, or this, that, and the other. That seems to be a sign, from what I've seen, and what the police are telling me, that money is part of it, and that they are wanting to go out more and more. Perhaps this person would only just come home from school and then be in their bedroom or in and around the house, playing consoles, and all of a sudden they're out and about. And I'm not saying we can keep tabs on our children 24/7, but I think parents are a big part of this. We're expecting the police to do more, and I think the police can do more. I think they're struggling with resources, and I think that's across the country, that there is a funding issue.
On that point, Vinay, this is something even personally that I've come across as well, through my own business. Where what if the police aren't going to do anything? Firstly, going back to the word that you used earlier, vigilante.
Mm.
Yes, there's a certain point as to which you don't cross, but if you're finding that the authorities aren't doing anything, and in a lot of cases they're not because their hands are tied, then it sort of does. Firstly, the criminals know that they can take advantage of the situation, and they do take advantage of the situation. But also, people that are the victims of it don't really have a choice because there's no one backing them up in the first place. So, what would you say
Yes,
in those cases? Because we can use vigilantes in a negative way, but if our hands are tied, what do you do?
I think we need to use it in a positive way, not a negative way. I think that vigilantism comes from community spirit. And I'll draw upon an example that isn't knife crime related specifically, but could well be. It was drug related.
Mm.
There was regular dealing going on in a certain area not too far from where we live, and the residents noticed a pattern. The same female walking at 3 o'clock in an afternoon, doing two loops of an area, which is unusual. Somebody on a bicycle arrives, somebody on a car arrives. The residents took note of this, and they did keep calling the police, but they then started keeping a spreadsheet. They logged registration numbers. They used their doorbell cameras and CCTV to garner evidence, and that actually resulted in a conviction because it gave enough evidence to the police that they could deal with it.
See, the worrying thing is, you said that it happened about 3 o'clock. The crimes aren't something because you'd associate crime when it gets dark. That's when it happens. But it's not. It doesn't matter what time of the day it is. Like for
Yeah.
example, what's happened in Swindon with the knife crime that's happened. That was at about 1 o'clock at lunchtime
Yeah.
when you'd be out with the children. So, what would you say? Because there are a lot of parents that would hear about crimes like this and think, "I'm never letting my children out again."
Yeah, and I think that is the current view of many people in the community. But let's remember what COVID taught all of us is you can wear a mask and you can hide your identity. So it no longer matters if it's dark or not. Criminality used to take place at night because you'd be less visible. Criminality can now take place at any time because all you've got to do is put a hoodie on and put a mask on or a balaclava on. And we got used to it. It became acceptable, and people have realised they can conceal their identities by wearing a mask.
Can we take that step now of saying, right, no balaclavas can be worn in this area, or does that go against human rights to do that?
I think it will go against some human rights, and there'd be complaints over it. But yes, I think we have to take a step. What that step is, whether we can just mandate it, I don't know. But I think it revolves around, going back to an earlier statement, the community having some positive reinforcement that if they're out there and maybe not creating any trouble right now, but the community need to be visible. Let's get out there, and I'm not saying confront them, but make that local area uncomfortable for them. Make it known that they're being watched. Now, obviously, everybody needs to be careful. Nobody should put themselves at risk. But if people realise that the community will not stand for this, they will move on. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, we will only move the problem on, but we need to keep disrupting it. And I think that is one way residents can get involved in some of this.
I'm going to bring this back to the South Asian sort of perspective of this. Now, it's interesting because a lot of the topics that we cover, I always say it, everyone always says, what will the community say? And it sort of breaks down those community bonds. Because one of the great things within the South Asian community is there is a strong bond within families and friends. And obviously, it's got the negative aspect. But what you're now saying is actually we need to get back to that. So we
Yes.
need to take the positives of that.
Yes. And I think the Asian community in particular has a good community spirit. Perhaps not so much in areas where we're spread out, but in areas like Leicester, Southall, Bradford, there is generally a good community spirit. And maybe we need to mix that up a little bit, because if we look at Southall, Indians look after Indians, and the Polish community that are now starting to arrive there and establish themselves look after the Polish community, but they're looking after their community. So if there is that youngster from the Asian community or Polish community or whichever community that might be getting dragged into something, it's noticed a little bit more, and hopefully there can be interventions. The thing we need is the intervention.
One thing I did notice when I went into the school this morning, all the parents are talking because obviously this knife crime has happened in Swindon, and there was a look of horror on quite a lot of the parents' faces because everyone was scared. But there was that when I left a conversation with some parents, they were like, "Look after yourself," and I thought that's such a nice thing to say. And they weren't Asian parents; they were. It didn't matter what color they were. They were just like, "Look after yourself." And my reply was, "Look after yourself," because we came together as a community and we thought this is happening to us. We need to look after each other. So there is that community spirit coming through. It doesn't matter what color you are; it's
Yeah,
coming through.
but I think it diminishes because we saw it through COVID as well. People were, looking out for each other. If you were passing somebody, you'd say hello, you'd make sure they're all right. You were checking in on elderly people to see if they needed any shopping. And then, as COVID's left us, that kind of be kind community spirit has dissipated. But unfortunately, it takes something like this, a serious event, to ramp it back up. And I think we'll see it continue for a while, but it's how we maintain that momentum of community spirit. If we talk about the roads we live on, how do we keep that community spirit up? And I think that's the more difficult part of this.
One thing I was going to mention a bit earlier is taking you back to, you've mentioned Southall, you've mentioned Leicester. Yes, there is that community spirit, but let's not forget that these areas too have been, I know Southall has been affected by knife crime. So although the community spirit is there, we know, especially within the London towns and the cities, knife crime is higher than what it would be in Swindon. This is a shock, obviously, for Swindon, and very much unexpected. I know when I spoke to Taj, you could see the shock on her face. But is community spirit enough to sort of stop? Not stop. That sounds, obviously, it's not enough to stop them. But is there enough fear in someone that is into drugs, is into drinking? Do they care enough even about the community spirit? Is it enough?
I don't think in areas like that it is currently. I think, but again, I don't think it's necessarily down to community spirit there. I think it's down to the economic disparity. That those who are economically disadvantaged, and with the cost of living rises, even worse so, you are drawn to other ways of making money, because ends aren't meeting and desperation sets in. And I feel for those, people, and we'd all love to help everybody more, but we have to be able to engage them, and that's where I think the community spirit can help. It's not a negative form of vigilantism, it's positive. It's how do we re-engage them into the community, reintegrate them into the community, and support and help them. And I think that is bigger than any of us. That's bigger than any police force. That's bigger than any council or local authority. That is this country. We need to go back to, and not just this country. I think it's worldwide. It's recognised that community spirit is diminished, and if we'd all look out for each other a little bit more, we could prevent more people heading into this sort of environment.
Do you think it's to do with the home life as well, that parents aren't bothering about what's happening with their kids, and they're like, don't care if you roam the streets? Could we blame where they're from, their parents not giving them enough guidance?
I think it'll play a part, absolutely. I think education starts at home. People are busier. People are probably working more to make ends meet. Do they really know where their children are? I'd like to say I do, but I can't 100% of the time say I do. Unless you're GPS tracking your children, which I'm not sure. I'm not sure which way's right. Is that too much? Is that not? I don't know.
Let's have that conversation, because obviously in the past there's two parts of this conversation, in fact, because it's about technology. Because although we're saying where are our kids? Well, in the good old days, that would be enough to freak most parents out. Where are our kids? Are they getting bullied? Are they involved in gangs? But now it's not the case, because obviously social media is now within the house. So they might be sitting there and there's a lot of trouble happening within the house. Now, in our generation, it was interesting because obviously the internet came in. I feel like an old person saying this. You had that dial up. But our parents didn't know how to use the internet. We were very much in control of that. Now, as a parent myself now, I now feel like what my parents probably felt like, because I'm not with it with the technology.
Yeah, I agree. And we now know about things very quickly. I think ignorance can be bliss at times. Back when we were youngsters, I used to know as soon as those street lights are on, I've got to be back home. I didn't, whether that was a watch or whatever, I knew when those street lights were back on, it was time to go home. That was my mode. Did my parents know where I was? No. Did my parents know the instant an incident happened? And let's not say that knife crime wasn't happening then, or any form of crime. We just didn't hear about it until it was on the news or in the paper. Whereas now, social media, and even beyond social media, just mobile phone technology, means that as soon as something happens, everybody knows. The identity of this young lad in Swindon, the police still haven't released, but it's all over social media.
Yeah, parents were talking about it and they didn't seem very surprised about the person it was. And I was like, okay, so this person is well known, which is worrying. So why wasn't anything done, an intervention, if this person was very well known to be involved in gangs?
So what I can say is there were interventions taking place in terms of sort of youth justice, but clearly it wasn't enough. Again, you can't keep tabs on them 24/7, but that's where it becomes a problem, isn't it? And that's where the tracking and everything else comes in. But whose role is it to track? Is it youth services or social services? Where does that guardianship stand? And that's the difficult one, because we're overstepping the mark.
Second question then, because it's led back to what I wanted to ask before. Do you think tracking our kids on their phones, and it is possible to do that, or even looking at their messages, in your opinion, and it is your opinion because it would be an interesting one, do you think we should be doing that to kids? Should we be tracking them? Should we be looking at their messages? Or looking at it the other way, it's an invasion of their privacy, and so we shouldn't. Human rights.
I think it can go both ways, but it's based on the relationship with our children. If you are open and transparent with them, hopefully they'll show you their phones. And I can speak from experience that our daughter does. She will even ask us at times how she should reply to something. If there's something a little bit causing tension, should I reply? Should I not? Should I? And then there's this whole stigma of, well, I can't leave them on read because they'll know that I've read the message. And that in itself causes a problem. If you didn't answer the phone back in our day, or you didn't answer that text message when we did have phones, nobody knew whether we'd read the message or not.
Can I say something that's really funny, Vinay? I've been told off just today by Taj for exactly the same thing.
And you've read my message, but you haven't replied.
That's exactly what the conversation was.
Yeah.
And that's such a sad state of events where someone knows that you've read the message. They need to change it on WhatsApp.
But this comes back to transparency, doesn't it? Is how transparent do you want to be with somebody? And in terms of parent-child, in a way, we should know what's going on as a guardian to anybody. You should know what's going on and have that relationship, because if you don't, then I think that's where this sort of thing occurs.
See, the thing is, when I have been speaking to parents and so forth, as you would in what's going on, I've been saying I wouldn't let my kids out. Before, I used to let them out at the park, but I could see them. Now I won't even do that. And I don't think I'll ever, not even when they're teenagers, let them out. We weren't let out. I'm not. We weren't imprisoned, but my life was happy, and I don't think I'm antisocial or anything like that. It didn't affect me. It's just the way we were brought up. But to others, that would be like, oh my God, that's crazy. But again, it's the relationship that you have with the child. Is there anything wrong with just keeping them at home, taking them out,
No,
dropping them at a parent, I don't know, a friend's house or something, being the taxi cab, driver,
I think that
wherever
plays a big part of it. I think if you can involve yourself in that way, it will help. It will work. They have a bit of freedom, but you know where they are and what time they're going to be back. And if somebody else is dropping them back, you know the timings. It's a level of protection. It's when you don't take that step that you lose all control, and actually they gain freedom. They're not being told what to do, where to go, when to be home. They're just out.
But this is a really interesting conversation, because going back to how we were brought up, like Taj said, we were at home at a certain time. We didn't go out too much, and that happened in a lot of Asian households, right? But now we are parents. We're like, well, actually, maybe that was too restrictive. Now, something quite drastic has happened in your area, and it is happening in many other areas. And now what we're saying is perhaps what our parents were doing wasn't restrictive. It makes sense.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's the lesson I've learned. We all rebel. You all try to go against the grain and say, well, so and so's allowed out. Why aren't I allowed out? But in hindsight, they were right. I don't think we came out that bad.
Yeah, but then contradicting myself, if another parent done it, it's the way that they want to bring up their child. I can't judge them for that. It's what they want to do and how they want to raise their child. So no judgment from me. But I'm not
Yeah,
letting my kids out.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And Serena this morning was hesitant about walking to get the bus. Um, we walked with her, so it wasn't an issue. But it does, when something like this happens, it does then worry the community. And like you said, Taj, at the school this morning, people are in shock, in genuine shock. But we need to bring that community back together. We need to rebuild that community and keep it together, keep it active, even if it's a neighborhood WhatsApp group, that sort of thing. We might as well take advantage of this technology that we've got. That a couple of lads just rode by, not sure anyone else spotted them. That will help because we're keeping an eye.
Are we saying those Asian aunties aren't so bad anymore? The prying
Absolutely.
eyes.
Yep.
So
That
now
those
what
curtain twitchers
we have come
were
in
doing
full
exactly that.
circle. We have come in full circle with this podcast of, oh my God, you want to keep away from those prying eyes of auntie, and that community is too close. And now all of a sudden something's happened and we're like, actually, no, we need to go back. It's crazy. I can't believe we're
I
actually
think
having
we
this
do. I
conversation.
think we need people putting their eyes out there and you know just raising that question. And it might be nothing. Let's be honest. It's cold out there. Maybe it's justified to have a hoodie on and your hood up, but it might not be. It might just save someone's life.
As we come to the end of this podcast, obviously this is an ongoing investigation, and throughout this whole podcast I think it's been so useful for myself as well as a parent, with the advice that you're giving and a member of the community. Can you sum up all of the points now going forward, with the fact that this has happened in your ward? What do you want to see happen in the short term and the longer term within the community that you serve?
Short term, I want to see the police bring justice. They seem to be leaving no stone unturned, so I cannot knock them for that. As Taj said, they're cutting bushes down. They've lifted drain covers.
They're
They are
amazing. They're
they're
standing in the
the
freezing cold. They have been amazing.
they are doing everything. So that's short term. Longer term, I want to rebuild this community. I want to get confidence in the community, even if that means, Taj, I go and stand at the park whilst youngsters come and play, and we do that collectively and make sure that nobody is around there, and we just reassure people that it's safe to be here. Then that's what we should do. And then the other element we need to remember and actually communicate better, I think, and I don't know exactly how the police work in this respect. It is an ongoing investigation, I get that. But I think the police could take steps to be clearer in their comms that this wasn't a random attack. This isn't just somebody playing in the park and maybe has said something and all of a sudden this incident has occurred. My sense of this is, and from what I know, this is targeted. Something has gone wrong, or there's a rivalry going on here. This is premeditated. The investigation is for murder. That is very much what it is. But that's what we need to communicate out to residents and get better at collectively. So that's my long-term goal.
It's interesting throughout this whole conversation. I think the one thing that stood out for me, and you've said it yourself, is the communication, whether it is from the police, whether it's between the community, but also between a parent and a child. And I think that's really key with how we go forward, especially when times are getting harder. But I want to
Absolutely.
say a massive thank you to you for coming on and talking about it. It's not easy for anyone that is involved, politically serving the community, but as part of this whole investigation. So thank you for coming and giving us your view on the whole situation and how we go forward as a community as well.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me communicate these messages. The wider we can get them, the better for everyone.
Perfect. That's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.